You're tuned into the Zealous Podcast. I'm your host, Rocky Snyder. This week I've got Kellie Loehr in the house with me, head athletic trainer of USA Lacrosse. We're going to get into it in just a moment. But in the meantime, check out Satanta College if you're looking for a master's in strength conditioning, athletic coaching, performance, sports injury and return to performance, whole bunch more. You can get 10% off tuition with code RS10. That's RS10. Follow us on Instagram at Rocky_Snyder. Hit the subscribe button, and here we go. So in the house, we've got Kellie Loehr, who's with USA Lacrosse. And I don't know about you, but if you grew up in the Northeast, you pretty much are born with a stick in your hands. Kind of like it's either a hockey stick or a lacrosse stick. I mean, it started up in the northeastern kind of portion of the United States, Canadian provinces, and going to UMass Amherst. It was one of those fun events because the UMass Gorillas, as they were called, were always vying for a national championship. And it seemed like Syracuse was the juggernaut at the time through the 80s and 90s, and they seemed to have our number, so we'd always finish second. But Kellie is the athletic trainer for USA Lacrosse. And well, Kellie, first, welcome to Zealous. Let's just get underway.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad to be here.
Yeah, now, interestingly enough, you were kind of raised in a family of lacrosse players. Is it kind of coincidental that you end up at USA Lacrosse, or was this something that you had your sights on?
A little bit of, the right place at the right time, a little bit of both, I guess. Yeah, so I grew up, did not play lacrosse, actually, probably the black sheep of my family, but I was a swimmer growing up. But I spent a lot of time on the field with my brother who played, my dad played, all his life up through an adult. I think he would still play if he could. But so I was around it a lot. My aunts and uncles, they all played. And so just being around it so much made it just a very comfortable sport, even though I never played it. But yeah, it's just kind of at the right place at the right time sometimes. And I think that's what worked out for me in this case.
Okay, I'm going to try and pull out my crystal ball here and predict the past. I'm thinking you were a swimmer, so at some point in time in your competitive history, you suffered from some kind of nagging shoulder, neck, or lower back injury where an athletic trainer kind of came to the rescue. You're like, wow, how cool is that? I think this is what I want to do with my life. Am I spot on, or where am I?
100%, 100%. Definitely have that nagging shoulder stuff, even still. I was a butterflyer, so, I got both sides that are well worn at this point. But yeah, 100%. When I got to high school, I started playing land sports, so I was playing tennis, and so my shoulders kind of were bugging me a little bit. And I was very lucky to have an athletic trainer at my high school. I went to a very small high school in South Central Pennsylvania, and looking back, when I think about it, how fortunate we were for such a small school, since so many secondary schools now don't have athletic trainers. But that was really my start and my segue into athletic training, and really got to know what the profession was about, what I might want to do, when I graduated. And so our athletic trainer there at the time, kind of gave me some feedback on where I could go, what schools were available and things like that. Because I thought I was going to be a physical therapist. I wanted to, still work with the athletic population, but kind of meshing the two. Athletic training seemed to be the right route. So when I graduated high school, I went to Westchester University in Pennsylvania, who's one of the founding athletic training programs and is still thriving today. And that's really where I got my start and what made me fall even more in love with athletic training.
Wow, very nice. And then was this at a time where you were required to get a master's, or was this prior to it and you were ATC?
This was prior.
I mean,
Yep.
where were you?
Yeah. So, oh yeah. So I got my bachelor's degree in athletic training from Westchester. And then after that, definitely wanted to get my master's degree. I knew I kind of wanted to keep going with school. I think if I had stopped school and, went to work, I don't think I would have gone back to school at that point. So I went to Louisiana State after graduation from Westchester, stuck with the purple and gold, I guess. But I got my master's in sport administration down there. While I was there, I mean, being at a big school like that, the SEC school, what a difference from Westchester, which was a Division II school. And I'd really gotten a lot of experience with, different levels. So high school, Division III, Division II, contact sports, non-contact sports. But being a Division I school like LSU was just mind-blowing for me coming from such a small
imagine.
School.
Did you work with any of the teams that were at LSU while you were doing sports management?
Yeah, so I worked with the men's and women's track and field team my first year. We were very excited. We won the SEC championship that year, so that was really fun. And then the next year I worked women's tennis.
Was Boo Snyder there at
He
that
was
time?
there. Yeah, he was kind of like on his way out. Yeah, but it was awesome to get to work with him, such a legend in the sport. But yeah, Coach Shaver was there, and he's obviously very renowned in the sport, and so it was such an experience. I didn't think I was going to like working track and field. I was kind of dreading it when I first got down there. But wow, what an experience. I just got so many great experiences there. I got to travel all over the country for our events, and working with high class athletes. It's fun now to look back and see who's still going, who's in the Olympics, who's doing all that stuff. And so it's fun to look back on and see what I got to do.
Well, was there an actual event at that moment where you weren't really looking forward to working with track and field, kind of dreading it, but then was there a pivotal point? Like there was something that happened, you're like, oh, this is going to be good.
Yeah, I don't think I really realized like the full effect that Division I had and like how good their teams were. I guess followed college football, so you knew what football was about, and everyone kind of got their hands in football when we were there. But really, I remember the first day and just seeing these athletes come in and seeing how focused that they were, and how much they loved their sport. It really made such a difference for me because they were dialed in, and that meant I had to be dialed in right along with them.
Yes. And so with your athletic training at LSU, what was it that, well, you were doing sports management. Were you also doing athletic training at the time? I mean, what was your role with your master's degree?
Yeah, so I was a grad assistant down there, which was great for me because they helped to support me through school, through that scholarship program that they had. And then was kind of learning, they had a couple different programs you could choose from, but I really gravitated toward the administrative side of things. I don't know if it's just something I enjoyed or something that was different. I knew I didn't really want to go into teaching, although, I like when I have students and I like being a preceptor now. But the administrative side and kind of getting to learn some different things that I didn't already know about, I think really opened my eyes to what else is available in the sports world, should I not want to be an athletic trainer anymore.
But so you went through your master's graduate program, but held on, obviously, to the fact that you wanted to be an athletic trainer.
Yeah.
I mean, so, but are there other avenues that you are kind of interested in? Not to pull you away from USA Lacrosse. I'm not trying to do that, but like, just what other avenues or pursuits, like passions, I guess, that you find intriguing?
Yeah, I mean, and I think when I was in school, I didn't even know what else was available. It's kind of, okay, you're going to work at a high school, you're going to work at a college, and that's really all that there is, or that I thought that there was. So after graduation, I went to work at Tulane University for their Institute of Sports Medicine. And there, as a hospital system, they have their hands in a lot of different things. I contracted to Loyola University down there, so I was getting that college level, very high end athletic events going on. But they weren't year round. So, all their student athletes go home in the summer. And so I was kind of at a point, well, what am I going to do? And because of the healthcare system that Tulane was, they had a few things I could do in the summer. I worked with the AFL, Arena Football League, for a couple summers. And then they started this program called the NFL Trust. So it's through the NFL Players Association, where former players can come and get like an evaluation done on their health status where they couldn't have gotten it any other way. So they would come, we would do cognitive assessments, orthopedic assessments, physical therapy, psychology, kind of get them in with their sports performance, and see, where we could help them and where to kind of navigate their health now that they weren't in the NFL anymore. And so I think that was one of the first areas that really opened my eyes to, okay, well, I'm an athletic trainer and I have this skill set on the sideline, but this can also translate into a more administrative and, still working with athletes, but just in a different way. So I felt very good about my decision for getting a sports administration degree, because I could start to use some of that information that I learned and translate it into what I know as athletic training into a more hospital administrative type of role.
Yeah, it seems like with the assessments you just mentioned, with players coming through, there is a high concentration, excuse me, or a focus on like post-concussion syndrome.
Yeah.
Is that really a big part of it?
100%. And one of the players that came in, and I think this will forever stick in my mind, came in, he was 33 years old. He had been, played in the NFL for a pretty short time in comparison to some other players, maybe 4 or 5 years. And he'd come in, I'm doing the initial assessment with him on the phone. I can't remember where he was from, but it wasn't from Louisiana where we were based. And he said, I have kids now. I'm taking them to school, and some days I just can't remember where I'm going. I forget. I'm on my way and I don't know which way to turn and which way to go. And, he had taken essentially so many hits in the NFL. And, I think he reported maybe 1 or 2 concussions, but that constant, repetitive motion, really, you could see in speaking to him how much it affected him later on in life, even after he'd been out of the NFL for years and years. And so that was certainly a huge focus of ours, to really figure out, okay, well, why is this happening? And what can we do to help you, right? Because this guy was 33 years old. He's got a very long, long life ahead of him, and kids and all of that. And so our focus there was to, one, kind of pinpoint what was going on and where these deficits were, and then 2, be able to help them moving forward so that they could go on and live a better life than what they currently were.
Fantastic. That must give you a little bit of lift in knowing that
Yeah.
this is a good direction and it has heart.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, absolutely.
well, I'm curious, do you like horror films? And I ask you that because I'm wondering if you like the gore aspect of being on the sidelines and seeing some really some nasty injuries, or is that something? Of course, you're not hoping that
Yeah.
anybody sustains something like that, but do you get a rush when those things happen?
Yeah, of course. And I think it's kind of funny. I do not like horror movies for the record, but it's so interesting. People ask me all the time, like, oh, what do you do when you get into these crazy scenarios and have an open wound or something really bad happens? And I think your mind just goes into focus mode. So I don't even think I realize what's happening like outside of the moment. It's just your focus. You're doing what you need to do. This is what we train to do. And then afterwards, kind of reflecting like, oh my gosh, that was a really gnarly injury. Did you see what happened? And we're watching the film back to see, what the mechanism was and all of that. But it's crazy how your mind just kind of goes to the place that you've worked so hard to train for, and it, becomes second nature.
Sure. Okay, well, how did you land at USA Lacrosse? You finished at LSU and Tulane, and
Yeah.
where did the road lead you to? How did you get there?
Yeah. So when I was down in Louisiana, I met my now husband at the time, and he was from New Orleans, and we were living a great life uptown in New Orleans. My whole family is in Baltimore, and I think we've both gotten to a point in our careers where we were ready to do the next thing. I was kind of feeling that pull back home. He was ready for a change in his career, and so we made the move back home to Baltimore. I had taken a job at Towson University where I was for 2 years. Fast forward a little bit, when I was there, I had my first son. So I have 2 boys. And after I had my first one, I was like, I don't know, this Division I, this is hard. This is hard as a new mom and as an athletic trainer, trying to balance the 2 of them. I'd obviously not done that before. And so I was again ready for a change and took a step back. So I kind of did a sabbatical year. I came to work for MedStar Health part-time. So I was able to be home with my son, which was an incredible year, something that you never really get back. But I got to work part-time and really get to know the MedStar Health system. So they're a very large hospital system here in the Maryland, DC area. And they have a massive sports medicine program. At the time, we had between 30 and 40 athletic trainers working there and a lot of contracts throughout the city. So it was very similar to what Tulane was set up like as a hospital system and the contracts that they had. So I felt very comfortable making that transition. And again, at the time, I was kind of thinking, what am I going to do? How do I translate my skills? I still want to be home with my kids and, make that balance work, but I'm ready to be back to work full time. And while I kind of was on this sabbatical year, MedStar Health and USA Lacrosse had formed a more official partnership. So they'd been working together for over 20 years. USA Lacrosse had moved from Homewood Field down at Johns Hopkins University, where their offices were and their Hall of Fame was, up to Baltimore County, where they built a brand new facility. They have a field here. And in part of that, MedStar Health put a clinic right in the basement of the facility. So along with that, they said, well, we need someone who can manage this partnership. We want someone who can be the best of both worlds and navigate what this partnership's going to look like. And so they wanted to put an athletic trainer there. So my boss at the time had come to me and said, hey, I have this position. We don't really know what it's going to look like. We just know that we want an athletic trainer there and someone who can manage, both doing some on-field coverage, but really, managing the partnership, working with the national teams that they have, and really trying to streamline what USA Lacrosse was trying to do from a medical standpoint. And so I was offered the role, kind of took it, having no clue what I was doing, or, no one had been in that type of position before. And so I was really able to kind of take it and run with it, and, have grown so much over the last 7 years.
Okay, so what is your role that you took on? Like, what are your responsibilities with USA Lacrosse, and are you not a concierge? Are you a liaison between these two organizations? I mean, where does it begin? Where does it end?
Yeah, exactly. So my official title with MedStar Health is community liaison, and the community that I serve is USA Lacrosse and the lacrosse community in general. So I'm stationed up here in the headquarters, and so I get FaceTime with both our MedStar Health physicians, PTs, sports performance, and strength coaches, and then I'm right here with everyone at USA Lacrosse as they come to work and all of that. So with USA Lacrosse, I kind of work in 4 different areas. So the first is our facility. We only have lacrosse here on our field, and we see over 250 events that play here, from first-time players all the way up to our national teams and our professional league that plays here in the summer, and everything in between. So we're getting college teams come to play a neutral site game. We're getting youth teams come for their practices each week, and really helping to manage and making sure that they have, athletic trainers or someone medical on site with that. The next area I work with is national teams. That's probably the biggest area and the most productive that I have. So when I first started, we had 5 national teams, and now we're up to 12 with the addition of our national team development, and then 6s, which will be the Olympic sport that you see in 2028 when lacrosse is back for that. But so that has grown so much, and each of our teams has their own medical staff, so athletic trainers and physicians, and I really help to oversee what they're doing and make sure that when they're with the teams themselves, that they're able to do the athletic training, the doctor side of it, and I'm taking care of all the administrative stuff on the back end. So managing our EMR system, ordering supplies, shipping things, getting things where they need to be, making sure that they have what they need, and then helping the athletes when they're kind of out of season and not physically with us. So our national team athletes train with us, maybe 3 to 4 times a year. They're not here all the time like a college team would be. And so being able to communicate with them and talk to them when they're not with us is a huge part of what I do, and making sure that they're feeling comfortable with USA Lacrosse and what we're offering them, but the medical staff that's with them, and making sure they're ready to go so that we can go win gold at the next World Championship.
Okay, so national teams, we're not talking. Well, there's the professional league, the professional lacrosse league. Is that what you're referring to? Is all those teams in the league?
Yeah, so those teams, they're separate from what we do, but most of the athletes that play in the PLL or Athletes Unlimited, our women's professional league, they come and play for our national team. So it's just like, NBA basketball, they have their own kind of league, but those all-stars go and play for Team USA when they're getting ready for a World Championship or the Olympics. That's what we are to lacrosse.
And how many national teams do you have?
So
You already said it.
Yeah,
12.
so we have 12 teams. So we have our men's and women's senior team are kind of our premier teams. They're the big field lacrosse. Most of our players are out of college. They're playing professionally, and they're playing on that big stage, probably the biggest one that World Lacrosse has for World Championships. So men's and women's senior. Then we have men's and women's U20. These are basically high school seniors, college freshmen, college sophomores, who are just at a younger age, so they go and play a World Championship as well. We have our men's and women's indoor team. This is actually the first year that we've had a women's indoor team. So that box lacrosse style, our men have played for years, but the women, this is team 1. And so that's been really exciting to watch them navigate the sport and learn and grow with that. And then we have our 6s program. So men's and women's 6s. Again, this is that Olympic style, small sided field play. And it's growing so much over the last few years, and especially the last few months, just from being named as an Olympic sport. And then our development program, our U16, U18 teams.
Fantastic. Yeah. I mean, the sevens in rugby is just
Yes.
so exciting to watch. I can only imagine the sixes are along the same vein.
Oh yeah, much
So,
faster paced, lots of goals. So that's all really exciting. And just constant movement the whole time.
what size is the playing field? Is the pitch the same, or is shrunk?
Smaller. Yeah, so
Yeah. Okay.
smaller. It allows, and there's not really a difference between offense and defense as much. You kind of get your flyers that go in and out, kind of like hockey, different lines are going in and out, but you're back and forth. There's no long poles like you see in the field game on the men's side. And it's just constant movement the whole time.
Which must present a different demand on the body, obviously. So, what are the more common injuries or events that you witness in lacrosse?
Yeah, and it varies a little bit between the men's and women's game. Obviously, the equipment's different, so you see some different injuries based on that. But concussions are very high on both sides. ACL tears, unfortunately, especially on the women's side, we're seeing that a lot. And then contusions, some fractures. Goalies are always breaking their thumb. Getting hit by the ball in the quads. See a lot of contusions from that way. Some ankle sprains, things like that. So there's not one injury that we're necessarily looking at that this is wreaking havoc on the sport. But definitely, those ACL tears and concussions are a concern that we've been worried about, and trying to find ways to mitigate some of that stuff.
What's the incident rate? Do you have like a percentage of players that suffer some type of ACL event or
Yeah, I don't have
concussion?
the specific numbers, but it's unfortunate, I think, just because of the nature of the game and the field that they play on. And it's just, the game has changed a lot, right? So the women's game used to be a lot more finesse. They had a bigger field. They were able to kind of take their time getting from one end to the other. And now it's just gotten so much faster, and the rules have changed to kind of accommodate some of those changes. And so a lot of change in direction and things like that we're seeing these injuries occur from.
So, not to get anybody kind of fired up in the pot here or get you in trouble, but I noticed that with women's collegiate lacrosse, helmets are not required, but they are with men's.
Correct.
Is that an up to date rule? Seeing that women's sport is changing to be faster and more powerful. I mean, are we just a little behind the time when it comes to protecting them from concussions with helmets?
Oh yeah, so it's definitely a hot spot in the lacrosse community. So I mean, the games are different enough, and the contact rules are different enough that the women's game isn't really. So you're allowed to actually, push on the guys. You're allowed to use your stick to try to get rid of the ball from their stick. The women, they're going to blow a flag on you if you're in the wrong place, type of thing. And because of that, they haven't felt the need to add helmets or anything onto the women's game. Now, women's headgear came out several years ago with the intention to hopefully reduce concussion and, prevent some of that stuff. And there's been a lot of studies recently that have looked at that and looked at, some of these arguments that people have, is putting women in headgear, is it making the game more dangerous, right? Are these players becoming more aggressive? And they haven't really found that that's the case. But there certainly is that perception that, wow, that person, they have something protecting them, where everyone else doesn't. So can they maybe be a little bit more aggressive? Can they use their body a little bit more? And if they get hit with the ball, is it just going to bounce off and they don't have to worry about that? But I don't anticipate it being like going in that direction. Although there's some states, Florida actually requires all of their high school women to wear headgear. And they've started doing some preliminary studies on that and what those injury rates look like. But really haven't seen too much issue with it. But at this point, it's really just a personal preference. I do see a lot of players who come and if they have it, and I usually ask, what made you want to wear the headgear? What made this a decision? And a lot of times it's, well, I've had a lot of concussions and my mom says I'm not allowed to play unless I have this on. And, you know, we see it in other sports too. I mean, look at soccer. They have some different headgear in soccer as well. And so I think it's a little bit of a similar situation there. But certainly a hot topic, and I'm sure there'll be some more research coming out as to the efficacy and, you know, what that looks like for injury prevention.
I bet. So much like many other teams, you have your own team behind the players to support them, whether it's a sports med professional, athletic trainer, physical therapist, strength coach, and so on. What are the roles or who's on your team?
Yeah,
Not necessarily by name, but their roles.
yeah, so we have a pretty big variety of medical staff that work with our team. So each of our teams has two athletic trainers and a physician. This is typically a sports medicine, primary care, or orthopedist who has a lot of team coverage and things like that. But they are the ones directly covering the teams. They're working with them, they're traveling with them, and taking care of their needs when they're all together. We also have strength and conditioning coaches that work with each of our teams, and that's more so based on age and, you know, what teams that they're playing for. So like our sixes and box team, we group those strength coaches together because they're very similar in nature. And then our women's field senior team and U20 team, you know, they're kind of working together. And this lends itself nicely because as the players are growing up within our system, they're working with the same sports performance coach, you know, they're working with the same medical staff, and they get to know them and their medical history and all of that. We're really lucky here at our headquarters site because MedStar Health is here. So we have physical therapists on site. We have a variety of consultants, you know, orthopedic surgeons, foot and ankle, shoulder, any specialty that we need. We have x-ray here. So like if there's something going on here, we have that kind of team behind the team there. And then we also have a sports science and safety committee that kind of is like our umbrella, oversees a lot of what we do, but professionals from all over the country that, you know, are helping make decisions based on what the national team is looking for.
And where are you in this kind of interweaving network? Like where do you grab the baton? Where do you pass it off?
Yeah, so I'm kind of at the middle-ish, top-ish. It's weird because it really is like a spider web. There's not necessarily like, okay, this is the head, this is the assistant, this is, you know, an up and down type of thing. But more so collaborative and, you know, how are we each working together and bringing the two organizations together, but then also, you know, servicing our athletes as they go out into the world. Because even though when we have our medical staff with them, we try to stay in touch with them. And, you know, if I have a question about a provider in Dallas, or I have an athlete who's down in Texas, I'll call our physician who's down there and say, hey, what can you tell me? You know, how can you help us to find the right type of physician for this person? Or do you have room in your schedule that you can see them? You know, so we're trying to create this network of individuals that we trust that are around the country and we can refer our athletes to should something happen.
It sounds like your role requires you to be at a computer or a phone and desk environment more so than getting out on the pitch. So are you missing that, or do you still have enough time to be out there on the field with the players and travel with them?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely days that I do miss doing that kind of stuff. You know, that's what I went to school for, right? That's why I fell in love with athletic training. But it certainly lends itself to some good balance for me, you know, as a person, as a mom, and still getting a little bit to dabble in that sports medicine coverage and all of that. So because we have such high standards for safety on our field, a lot of times there's teams that come, they don't have athletic trainers. So we'll get to cover them. We'll have the Athletes Unlimited, the women's professional lacrosse league here, and we provide direct coverage for them. So I get to see them. They play in July and August here, and so you know I get my kicks from working with them. And then our development team, we're actually the medical providers with them. So MedStar Health provides athletic trainers and physicians for that. So we're getting to be on the field and provide that direct coverage. So I certainly get a good balance of sitting behind my computer and then being out on the field and working with the teams.
And are the seasons staggered based on the different teams, like the national team compared to the women's, and then the U20s and box or sixes? Is it that you are constantly having an in season with somebody and an off season with another? So you've got all of these balls you're juggling at different stages in the year?
A little bit. So we're kind of opposite of what a normal like school setting would look like, right? So the summers are really slow for a high school. You know, they're not in season for anything. We're kind of opposite. So the winter is really slow for us. So December and January is time I get to take my PTO and, you know, enjoy some time with my family and all of that. Because in the summer, the national teams are at their busiest. So I think this year we have 3 world championships that we're preparing for. And so each of those teams is training more and more as they get ready to go to that event. But we'll still have training camps for our other teams that, you know, are playing next year or the following year. Our senior teams kind of train on a 4-year cycle. And so they're getting together more frequently. They're starting earlier. Whereas our men's and women's U20 teams, it's really like an 18-month process. So for example, our women's U20 team, they did their tryouts last summer and they've kind of been cutting them down. This summer, they'll name the team and then play in August in Hong Kong for their world championship. So it's a much shorter cycle for them. Whereas our senior teams, you know, our men's team, they just ended. They won the gold medal last year in San Diego. So they'll take a year off and then next year they'll start the process again and getting their team together and start prepping for, I guess for them, it'll be 2027 that they'll play their next round. So they operate on a 4-year cycle, but it really kind of ebbs and flows based on their championship year.
And what about your role with that team? Like, is there a 3 to 6 month preparation before they really get underway? Is that how it works?
So the spring is a traditional lacrosse season, but that also means that our medical staff is working with their lacrosse team. So most of them are, you know, out of college, out of high school, so they're working lacrosse. And so I try to navigate some of those player relationships during that time as they prepare to come in the summer. So I would say June to August, September, we're seeing a bulk of our training camps here on site. And then the World Championship's actually a 2-week period at some location around the world. So like I mentioned, the U20 team's going to Hong Kong. So they'll do training camps leading up to that in the summer. So we try not to mess with, you know, the collegiate lacrosse season too much. Because, you know, our players might be coaching at a college team or they're playing for a college team or you know, our athletic trainers are with the team. So the spring is pretty quiet from that aspect, but it's definitely when I use a bulk of my time to prepare for the summer and trying to be proactive so that future Kellie can reap the benefits of what I do this time of year.
So that makes complete sense. Now, you mentioned the Olympics, 2028, the Sixes are going to appear. But this isn't the first time lacrosse has been in the Olympics. Was it just as an exhibition sport a few Olympics ago, or was it part of it? I'm kind of blurred on that. Like, give me a little background on why, how and why lacrosse is now going to be appearing in 2028.
Yeah, I've learned a lot about the way that the Olympics and the IOC operates over the last couple months as we're trying to figure out, are we going to get in? Are we going to get in? So the last time that lacrosse was in the Olympics, I believe was back in the 30s. So it was an exhibition sport then, also played in the United States. So it's kind of a full circle moment that it's back in LA in the United States that we'll play again. But yes, it's been a long time, right? Almost 100 years that it's been as an Olympic sport. So the biggest thing that I learned is that the local organizing committee, so LA 28 in this case, was able to select several sports to be a part of their games. Now, it doesn't mean that lacrosse is always going to be in the Olympics moving forward, but we know at least in 2028 that it'll be part of the games. It'll be a medal game. And that's super exciting. We're very hopeful for the following Olympics. That'll be in Australia, which is a huge lacrosse country. And they're always one of the top contenders for a gold medal in both the men's and women's side. So we're hopeful that it'll continue to be in the Olympics after that. But for now, we're just really enjoying and being excited for 28 and starting to prepare for our Sixes teams to do that.
Yeah, I can imagine. And I am also imagine that the U20 are just frothing, knowing that in 4 years, they will be of a prime age to be competing while the nationals are maybe aging out potentially.
Yeah.
Is there competition or banter already kind of bubbling up between the groups?
No, I wouldn't say competition. I mean, lacrosse is a very supportive community, and you see it, when our development teams are here, or even our U20s, they look up to the senior teams, and the senior teams are always trying to reach back down and, how can I help? How can I coach them up and all of that? But you can definitely tell. I mean, last year when our development team was here, in October, they had just announced that they were going to be in the Olympics, and you could almost like feel that excitement because that group really, they could be in LA in a few years, right? I mean, they're at the perfect age for that. And I think one of the biggest things that we'll start to see is that change in the field sport to sixes. So, we may start to see some athletes who want to play sixes more. Maybe they don't necessarily want to play on the field, but they want to focus more on sixes because of that Olympic involvement. But it's really cool to see, our coaches and our senior team that are coming to the development and the U20 event and hearing that you guys are the future. You guys are the ones that are going to represent your country in a few years, on the Olympic stage. And I think it's just exciting for everyone.
I would imagine. Now, with the sixes, is it filtering down into the collegiate level? Because I don't feel like it is, but maybe I'm just not part of that world yet. But are sixes appearing in the NCAA?
Yeah, not yet. I feel like I've seen a lot more of the indoor being played, and, especially in the Northeast teams. That's how they're training. They're utilizing that winter time where they usually would be down, and they're putting on all the box equipment, and they're playing that. And that's very similar to the sixes game. But we haven't seen, teams that are like, oh, I want to have a sixes program. Will we see it? I'm not sure. I was actually in a meeting yesterday, and we were talking about just that. Are we going to see sixes become the new thing? But USA Lacrosse is really starting to push it at the youth level. And I think hopefully it'll start to grow from the ground up that way, where, you only need 6 people to play. So you can pick up and play. It's a smaller field. You don't need all the equipment. You don't need, a big, massive space and all the people. And so having smaller roster sizes is just going to lend itself to more people being able to play. And hopefully at that rec youth level, we'll start to see it more and start to build up, creating these sixes athletes, right? Not necessarily just the field style.
So, back to your athletic training world, have there been protocols, procedures, philosophies that have come up into the last year or so to address the more common issues that you're dealing with, whether it's high hamstring pulls, inversion sprains, ACLs, concussions? I mean, you could probably list a few more, but how much is that evolving? How much growth or development is occurring with your field of athletic training and those issues?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're just kind of at the tip of the iceberg with exploring what all of that stuff looks like. I mean, certainly we can track through, the high school Rio and some of the NCAA injury tracking, that they're doing. But I think what we're starting to see is a lot more use of biometric tools. We at USA Lacrosse use Stat Sports, and so we're able to put those GPS units on our players, and see what their workload looks like. I mean, for a sport as old as lacrosse, it really is a baby sport in the world of everything else that's going on. And so there's not a lot of details on what's the workload look like. What does a professional player look like? Like if you could put numbers to it, right? And so I think we're really just at the tip of figuring out what that is and what that looks like. And then comparing what the field event is to the sixes. So that's one of our main goals here that we've been doing, with our biometric program is, okay, well, what does the workload look like in the sixes game? And what does it look like in the field game? And our, initial find is that they're very similar. For a game that's almost half the time and half the field, those players are booking it the whole 40 minutes that they're out there, and their mileage is just pretty similar to what a field player's looks like.
Really?
So it's really interesting to see, just these preliminary data points that are showing how similar that they are. But really, I mean, there's so much that we could dive into and see, what the differences are, and really what makes a lacrosse player.
Well, I imagine, though, just not to go too much into geekdom here and sports science and GPS, but if you've got a field athlete compared to a sixes athlete, that sixes athlete is going to have heck of a lot. In my imagination, they're going to be sprinting a tremendous amount more, even though their mileage may be similar. So the field athlete is going to be jogging and then sprint and recover
Exactly.
and continuous. So there's going to be different demands in that regard. But you're, like you say, you're just now starting to gather data and really just trying to sort through it. For you in your role, like what are the big data points? What is it that you're hoping to gain insight into when it comes to measuring these athletes with biometrics?
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, we just want to know, you know, what these players are doing and then how can we facilitate their healthcare aside from that. So if we know that they're having a day where they're running miles and miles at practice and their top speed is at their highest, how can we tailor that so that the next day, maybe they're doing a little bit less, but still being productive with their teammates. And then, looking at their health data. So are you having a lot of injuries and how can we compare that to the biometric data that we're given? Is there a correlation between the two and can we mitigate that in any way? And I think that's, for me, it's one of the big goals, so that, when we do have health issues that arrive, when there's lots of injuries, that we can kind of look back and say, oh, well, this particular drill, we saw they were doing so much and we had 4 hamstring strains during that time. Okay, well, we're going to look at that and see if we can make adjustments so that we're not seeing that specific injury with that drill.
Yeah, it seems in my mind, the athletic trainer is there is preventative measures, like you just mentioned, but more often than not, you're dealing with the after the event occurs.
Mm-hmm.
So the maybe the well, not so much physical therapists, but the strength coaches, the conditioning coaches, and the technical coaches themselves are the ones that are kind of on the other side before the event occurs. So how do you take your insight and information and apply it to those individuals in those roles? Like, hey, look, I've just been seeing a lot of inversion sprains and it's been occurring when this happens. So I just want you to be aware that we either need to prepare them for those episodes or avoid them, one or the other. Like, how do you have those conversations if you do have those
Yeah,
conversations?
I mean, I think the biggest thing is just communicating that it's happening, right? Like the coaches isn't going to know that we had all of this, or they might not in their mind realize that it was from a specific incident, or and maybe it's not, right? But just having those conversations, which can be really difficult at times. We have our coaches that are here are national championship coaches, right? Like they have very high expectations and high demands of their athletes when they're here. And so it can be a little bit intimidating to say, this player's out and they're not going to be able to play with you. Or, hey, we noticed that this happened during practice the last 3 days. Is there something that we can make adjustments for? But honestly, I mean, our coaches are the best. And that's part of the reason that we hire them, right? Like they're good at what they do, but they're also good people. And we try to hire that from whether it's our medical staff, our coaching staff, sports performance, whatever it is across the board, because by the time they get here, everybody's good, right? You have the best players and all of that. And so that really helps in the communication side that I know I'm not going into the lion's den every single time to have those hard conversations, but really it's just having them, even if they might be uncomfortable, but in my opinion, it's better to communicate that type of stuff up front than to wait and wait and wait till something gets worse.
And you've been there now for 6, 7 seasons.
Mm-hmm.
So you've had enough of those conversations where
Yeah.
it's yeah, I can
Oh yeah.
imagine.
Oh yeah.
Okay, from like a biomechanics standpoint, I'm curious with the stick, running with the stick, you'll often see a player running with just one hand holding the stick, but then there'll be other times where they're running with both hands. And getting both hands to hold a stick while running, in my understanding, is going to give a lot more torsion, a lot more torque into the lower back and groin. So the question is that an area that you see a lot of injuries, low back and groin?
Yeah, 100%. And actually, we just started a project with several of our physicians to kind of figure out why. But yeah, what we're seeing is that specifically in the youth male player, so middle school, high school player, is that repetition, that overuse, a lot of times in the shooting mechanics. And the mechanics in the men and women, they're very similar with the shooting, but we see a little bit more rotation on the men's side. And so we start to see some of these things like low back stress fractures, spondies, disc protrusions and things like that are starting to happen a little bit more frequently, or maybe we're just aware of them more. But yeah, 100% it's something that we worry about. And we're kind of working right now to figure out, is there something we can do to help reduce what these players are doing? And how can we help them when they do start feeling low back pain? I think a lot of times kids are seeing, what the professionals are doing. They're seeing that more is better, and it's not always the case, especially with these type of injuries, because the more that you're rotating on a already weaker spine, the more we're going to see injuries come out of that. And so, yeah, this is certainly something that's coming to the forefront. And I expect a lot more over the next several years to come out about low back pain. But yeah, we're certainly seeing it, and we're working towards, how can we eliminate it or at least mitigate it a little bit. But yeah, definitely a concern.
Any other thing boiling up to the surface that's similar in nature?
No, I mean, I guess a few years ago we would have said, like with head injuries and things like that. And I think that, concussions are always going to be a really high, thing that we worry about. But it's not really at the top anymore. ACL, injury reduction and things like that. We actually put together a program a few years ago, Lax Fit, that I've talked to a lot of coaches that they're starting to incorporate that with their teams during warm-ups. The strength coaches are getting involved, but just adding a little bit of extra strengthening and, hip strengthening, quad strengthening things to their warm-ups to kind of hopefully reduce their amount of ACL tears that they have. And we've seen really good feedback from that program, and hoping to do the same thing with this low back stuff too.
Right on. All right, Kellie. So for those students that are on the athletic training path, or for that matter, the sports management track, what advice would you give to those that are coming behind you and moving in your direction? What worked for you? What advice would you give?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of twofold. I think the first is, know that your goals can change, right? Your dream job when you're in school might be completely different when you get out of school. And once you start to realize like what else is out there, it's more than just working at a high school or a college. And I think there's a lot of ways that you can forge your own path or create roles like this where they're needed. So finding holes, finding little places where an athletic trainer could be useful. I mean, we have such a wide variety of skill sets, that being able to plug yourself into an organization that might need just a little bit extra help, those jobs are out there. It's just a matter of putting yourself out there and kind of finding where you fit within that. And then the other thing I think is just finding your people, right? Using your mentors, using your network, and finding people who are going to support you, and allow you to work hard so that you can find those little places that an athletic trainer is needed or that your skill set could be useful. If you have a good support system behind you, I think there's nothing that you can't do.
Right on. And if people want to follow you and USA Lacrosse for that matter, I want to put some links in the description below the podcast. So do you do any kind of social media posting like Instagram or anything like that?
Yeah, so we actually have an Instagram account. It's AT_beyond the sideline. And we just really try to highlight all the different things that we do as athletic trainers and, what we do in our system, what we're doing at USA Lacrosse, and, just kind of show the fun that we're having every day and the different things that we're doing. And yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. You can find me on LinkedIn, obviously, like you did. And then, yeah, email. I'm always available, for students and, people who just want to talk or learn more about what we're doing here and how they can be involved. And, I just love connecting with people and growing my network so that, when I'm needing something or if someone needs me, that we're right there.
Well, my daughter Madison, we call her Maddie, she's at Pacific University playing lacrosse and on the 5-year track to get her master's in athletic training. Who knows? She may be heading to the Mid-Atlantic region and knocking on your door anytime soon. But this has been super fun for me. I really appreciate your time and your insight. And I have another reason to be looking forward to the 2028 Olympics too, because that is going to be a blast. Kellie, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
And that's a wrap for this episode of Zealous Podcast. I want to thank Kellie for coming on, sharing all she did. Meanwhile, remember, if you want to get into education with a master's in applied sports biomechanics and movement science, or maybe you're interested in applied sport and exercise psychology, performance coaching, or sports injury and return to performance management, check out Setanta College, setantacollege.com, and you get 10% off tuition with the code RS10, RS10. I'll see you next week.